What if everything you believed cost you everything you had? They walked with Jesus. They touched miracles. They heard divine truth echo straight from the mouth of God. But what most people don't know is how these 12 men ended their lives. Not in palaces, not in peace, but in prisons, torture chambers, and blood-stained soil. You've probably heard their names in Sunday school or read them quickly in a Bible verse. But no one really talks about how they died, or why they faced such brutal ends. And the answer might just flip your whole understanding of faith, power, and purpose upside down. Here's something few dare to say. Christianity wasn't built on comfort. It was built on corpses. And not just any corpses, but the willing sacrifices of men who saw something so real, so unshakable, they'd rather die than deny it. The apostles of Jesus didn't just spread a message, they became the message. This isn't just history. This is your spiritual inheritance. Because once you hear what really happened to each of these men, you'll never read the New Testament the same way again. So stick with me. By the end of this video, you'll understand why true faith often begins where safety ends. And maybe, just maybe, it'll awaken something in you that's been asleep for far too long. What if I told you that the greatest heroes of faith died without a sword, but with eyes burning with courage? They weren't kings or generals. They were ordinary men, fishermen, tax collectors, dreamers. But when they answered the call of the living Christ, something changed forever. The apostles of Jesus didn't just listen. They obeyed, even knowing it could cost them everything. And you? Have you ever stopped to think about what you'd be willing to sacrifice for what you truly believe? They weren't after fame or applause. They carried a fire in their chests that no whips, prisons, or crosses could extinguish. Their faith was like a flame in the middle of a storm, flickering, but never dying. That reminds me of what many face today in silence. Maybe you're out there, being criticized for choosing your spiritual path. Guess what? You're not alone. The apostles of Jesus felt that too, deep in their skin. But hold up. What I'm about to show you is something few truly know. The persecution was physical, yes, but before that, it was a mental war. Fear whispered daily, "Is it worth continuing?" Still, they responded with actions, not just words. Here's a practical tip. Create the habit of silencing external chaos with daily meditation, conscious fasting, or even writing letters of faith. Just like the apostles did. That might become your mental shield. Think about it. How many times have you wanted to give up just because it felt like you were swimming against the current? The apostles of Jesus were swimmers against the tide of the Roman Empire. While many stayed silent to survive, they shouted to awaken. Practical idea? Read the book of Acts like you're watching a revolution. You'll feel the pulse of risk, surrender, and boldness in every line. And here's something that might shock you. Many of them knew exactly how they were going to die. Yet they went anyway. Is that madness? Or is it faith taken to the edge? Next time someone tells you spirituality is weakness, remember this. These men faced beasts, swords, and flames. Not with weapons, but with a courage that defied human logic. And that, my friend, is more powerful than any army. If this touched your heart or opened your eyes, consider subscribing. Here, we walk together toward the truth that sets us free. You'll never look at the apostles of Jesus the same way again, and we're not done yet. What comes next might be the missing piece in your understanding. Because now, we're going to talk about a man who asked to be crucified upside down, feeling unworthy to die like his master. Would you be willing to die upside down? Just to prove you're not worthy of your master. That's exactly what Peter did. This man, once impulsive and full of doubts, became the boldest voice of the early church. But when the time came, he didn't run, he embraced the cross. Literally. The apostles of Jesus were no strangers to sacrifice, but Peter's humility cut deep. And maybe that speaks to you, because real strength often wears the clothes of surrender. Peter wasn't always the rock. Remember, he denied Jesus 3 times. And yet he was chosen to lead. Isn't that wild? It tells us something powerful. Your past doesn't disqualify your future. Many people today walk around with guilt tattoos in their soul. But like Peter, you can be both broken and chosen. The apostles of Jesus constantly lived in this paradox. And you can too, by embracing grace over shame. But hold on. What came next was brutal. Peter was sentenced to death in Rome under Nero, a tyrant who lit his gardens with Christian bodies. Even in that darkness, Peter stood tall. Well, until he requested to be crucified upside down. That detail? It wasn't just symbolic. It was revolutionary. He turned death into a declaration of reverence. And here's the question. How can we do the same with our daily struggles? Try this. Next time you're humiliated or feel less than, flip the script. Literally. Write down your pain, and below it, write a reason why it might be your preparation, not your punishment. That's what Peter did with his life. His humility was his power, and the apostles of Jesus weren't just brave, they were wise. They knew that real victory often comes wrapped in apparent defeat. It's crazy to think, but that upside-down cross, it became one of the most powerful symbols in Christian history. And Peter? His bones now lie under St. Peter's Basilica, a fisherman turned martyr, buried under a palace of faith. Talk about divine irony. But hey, maybe you feel like your life is too small to matter. Don't be so sure. God often hides greatness in simple places. If this message stirred something in you, take a moment to breathe, reflect, write, or pray. And if you feel this channel is bringing you clarity and truth, consider subscribing. We're just getting started, because what comes next is even more intense. A man who preached until his dying breath, nailed to an X-shaped cross in Greece, and whose legacy flies today in the flag of an entire nation. What if your final breath echoed through centuries, carved into a flag, burned into history? That's what happened with Andrew, the brother of Peter, but with a path all his own. While Peter went to Rome, Andrew turned to Greece. And it was there, among philosophers and pagans, that his faith found its sharpest test. The apostles of Jesus didn't just follow Christ, they dared to plant light in the heart of darkness. And Andrew? He did it with a voice that wouldn't break, even tied to a cross. Now here's a twist you didn't see coming. Andrew wasn't nailed, he was tied. Why? To prolong his agony. 2 whole days hanging on an X-shaped cross, still preaching, still praising. That image is both haunting and heroic. Imagine the crowd, some mocking, some weeping, as this man, torn by pain, kept pointing to heaven. That's the kind of faith that stares death in the eyes and whispers, "You don't get the final word." You ever feel like your pain is stretching out longer than you can bear? Maybe it's not punishment, it's platform. That's what Andrew turned his cross into. A pulpit. Instead of complaining, he proclaimed, "And you can too." Try this spiritual habit. When the pressure is overwhelming, declare one truth out loud every hour. Let your suffering preach. That's what the apostles of Jesus did, with power. Here's something wild. Andrew's symbol, the saltire, the X-cross, became the flag of Scotland. A fisherman's final breath became a nation's emblem. Talk about legacy. That shows us something important. Your impact might not be seen today, but it could echo tomorrow. So don't underestimate the quiet battles you're fighting right now. They might be writing a story bigger than your own. But wait, here's a detail often missed. Andrew chose to die in a position of openness, arms stretched wide, vulnerable. It's the same posture of worship, of surrender. Maybe there's a lesson there. The more open you are to the divine, even in pain, the more heaven echoes through you. The apostles of Jesus weren't afraid to be exposed. They knew that glory shines brighter through wounds. Still with me? Then maybe this story stirred your soul. If so, don't walk this journey alone. Hit subscribe, and let's walk through these stories together. Each one holds a key to your spiritual breakthrough. Because up next, we enter a darker arena. Public execution, royal orders, and the first apostolic martyr. A man whose death became the seed of millions of pilgrimages. Imagine being the first to die for a truth the world wasn't ready to hear. James, son of Zebedee, faced that fate head-on. He wasn't just another follower, he was in Jesus' inner circle, and yet that closeness didn't spare him. In fact, it marked him. When Herod Agrippa unleashed his wrath, James became the first apostle to be publicly executed. The apostles of Jesus knew the cost. James paid it early, with his head and with his heart ablaze. Let me paint this picture. For you, a Roman blade, a gathered crowd, a silence that felt like thunder. And then, one swing, one life offered, and something shifted in the spirit realm. That moment wasn't just a death. It was a declaration. A seed buried in blood that would one day sprout into pilgrimage routes, cathedrals, and global awakenings. And that seed? It's still bearing fruit in places like Santiago de Compostela. But don't miss this. James didn't flinch. No records of fear. No begging for mercy. That silence? That's not weakness. That's resolve. That's what happens when someone knows their purpose is bigger than their pulse. You feel that too sometimes? That whisper that your life has, meaning even when the noise says otherwise? Hold on to that. Like James did. There's something deeply personal here. We all fear being forgotten. James's story tells us the opposite. Sacrifice is never wasted. His tomb became a sacred trail, his name, a banner of courage. You may never stand before a king, but you stand before choices every day. Choices to keep your integrity, to speak truth when silence is safer. That's modern-day martyrdom, and it matters. Want to embody that spirit? Practice quiet boldness. Speak up for someone today. Defend what's right, even when it's unpopular. Fast, not just from food, but from self-pity, from fear. That's spiritual strength training. That's walking in the footsteps of the apostles, of Jesus. And hey, if this hit you somewhere deep, don't scroll past. This might be your moment of awakening. Subscribe, join the journey. Let's walk through fire, not to be burned, but to be refined. Because next, we're about to meet the only apostle who didn't die a martyr, but whose revelations shook the heavens. The man of visions, exile, and eternal words. What if your isolation became the stage for the greatest vision in human history? That's what happened with John, the beloved disciple. While others met swords and flames, John met silence, exiled to the rocky island of Patmos. But don't be fooled. Patmos wasn't a punishment. It was a portal. Alone, surrounded by the sea, John received the revelation, a cosmic message that still shakes souls. The apostles of Jesus weren't done with the world, and God wasn't done with John. Here's something few talk about. Exile often feels like failure. Maybe you've felt that too, cut off, abandoned, left behind. But John's story flips that script. The very place meant to silence him became the womb of prophecy. Think about that. Your current isolation? It might be divine preparation. Practice. Solitude, not as escape, but as encounter. Light a candle. Open scripture. Listen deeper. John wasn't just a survivor. He was a seer. His vision wasn't born in comfort, but in crisis. Thunder, trumpets, angels, beasts. He saw it all and wrote it down with trembling hands. Revelation isn't just a book. It's a mirror. It reflects the war inside us, the hope beyond us. Want to access that clarity? Start a habit of journaling your dreams, impressions, prayers. You never know when heaven might whisper. But here's the mystery. Why was John spared? Some say to be a witness. Others, to finish what only he could see. His longevity wasn't a reward. It was a mission. And maybe you feel that too. Watching others move on while you're still here, still fighting, still waiting. Let John remind you, delay isn't denial. Sometimes the last one standing holds the loudest truth. And let's not forget, he also shaped Christian theology in silence. No crowds, no spotlight, just presence. So if you're in a season of hiddenness, take heart. What's formed in secret often transforms the world. That's the legacy of the apostles of Jesus. That's the calling on you. If this lit something inside you, don't let it dim. Subscribe now, because the next chapter will challenge your view on miracles, power, and what it means to stand firm when everything says flee. Up next, the fearless voice who shook Turkey with signs and wonders, only to end his life nailed to a cross for a faith he refused to deny. What if your miracles sparked a riot and your faith cost you your life? That was Philip's story. In a land now known as Turkey, He walked with quiet power, not with swords, but with signs. He healed, he spoke truth, and he disrupted the spiritual sleep of an entire region. And when authorities demanded silence, Philip chose the cross. The apostles of Jesus knew, miracles may open eyes, but unwavering faith is what changes hearts. Here's a twist. Philip's death wasn't instant. He was crucified upside down, yet not in Rome, but in Hierapolis. Why? Because he challenged systems. He exposed illusions. And you? Maybe you've noticed that when you step into your calling, resistance rises. That's not a sign to stop. It's confirmation you're shaking what needs to fall. Philip stood tall, even as he hung from wood. Think about this. Philip didn't seek attention. He just obeyed. That's the kind of obedience that moves mountains. Quiet, consistent, surrendered. In your daily life, how do you respond to divine nudges? Next time you feel led to pray for someone or speak a word of encouragement, do it. That's how spiritual boldness is built. That's how the apostles of Jesus lived, moment by moment, miracle by miracle. And here's something to sit with. His tomb still exists. In modern-day Turkey, his final resting place remains a symbol of power. Not the power of wealth, but of witness. Imagine your life leaving a mark like that. A legacy not of likes or followers, but of spiritual transformation. Start small. Fast. One meal. Pray intentionally. Philip didn't wait to be perfect. He acted when the Spirit stirred. Let's be honest. Faith can be costly. Sometimes you lose friends. Other times, you face ridicule. But Philip's death tells us your defiance, when rooted in love, becomes your offering. Don't water down your fire to keep others comfortable. Let your conviction be your compass. That's how you honor the legacy of the apostles of Jesus. If this stirred your spirit, pause and reflect. Then consider subscribing. This space is for those who refuse to settle for shallow faith. You're not alone in this. And now, we venture into a story even darker. A man skinned alive after converting a king. A martyrdom so brutal, it still haunts the spiritual imagination to this day. Could you hold on to your faith while your skin was being torn from your body? That's not a metaphor. That's Bartholomew's reality. After converting a king in Armenia, he was captured by those threatened by his message. His punishment? Being flayed alive, his skin peeled off as he refused to deny Christ. The apostles of Jesus didn't just talk about commitment, they embodied it. And in Bartholomew's silence, heaven roared, here's the brutal truth. Sometimes, obedience brings pain before it brings breakthrough. We don't like to hear that. We want the blessings, not the bruises. But Bartholomew's story shows us that love for truth runs deeper than fear of suffering. Maybe you're facing emotional flaying, criticism, rejection, betrayal. Still, your faith can be louder than their attacks. Now let's go deeper. Bartholomew didn't fight back. He didn't curse. He endured. That level of surrender only comes from a soul anchored in eternity. Want to tap into that kind of peace? Try contemplative prayer, not begging, just being. 10 minutes a day, eyes closed, heart open. That's how you build the strength to endure storms you never saw coming. And here's something most don't know. He's now the patron saint of those who suffer. His agony became comfort for others. That's legacy. That's spiritual alchemy. Transforming pain into purpose. So the next time you're in a dark place, ask, how can this hurt become someone else's healing? That's what the apostles of Jesus did. They bled so others could breathe. His body was discarded, but his story wasn't. It traveled through generations, etched into icons, whispered in prayers. What does your life echo when no one's watching? Start shaping that now. Read martyrs, biographies, study courage, journal your own struggles. You're not weak for hurting, you're human. And like Bartholomew, your endurance may outlive your name. If this pierced your heart, take a breath, let it settle. Then, if this channel is helping you anchor your soul in truth, consider subscribing. Here, we honor the fire that refines. Next, we follow a man who carried the gospel to India, where his journey ended with a spear, and his legacy birthed a community still alive today. What if your doubts turned into the very fire that carried truth across continents? That's the paradox of Thomas. The same man who questioned Jesus' resurrection became the one who brought the gospel to India. From skeptic to missionary, his journey was radical. The apostles of Jesus weren't perfect, they were transformed. And Thomas? He turned his questions into bridges that reached the ends of the earth. Now imagine this: southern India, foreign tongues, unfamiliar customs, and one man with a burning message. Thomas didn't arrive with armies. He came with conviction. He baptized, taught, and planted communities. And despite cultural resistance, he kept going. That's your reminder. You don't need approval to start your mission. You just need clarity. Obedience will carve the path. But here's the twist. Thomas's mission ended in blood. Speared to death near modern-day Chennai, he sealed his message with martyrdom. His killers thought they silenced him, but they sparked a movement. Today, the St. Thomas Christians still thrive. That's spiritual legacy. Your life may be just one seed, but in God's hands, it can grow into a forest of faith. So what can you apply? Start honoring your own journey, even if it began with doubts. Doubt isn't the enemy, it's the doorway. Journal your questions. Don't suppress them. Wrestle with them in prayer, scripture, and wise conversation. That's what Thomas did. And look what his faith became. The apostles of Jesus teach us this. Transformation starts with honesty. Let's get practical. Research the St. Thomas Mount. Read about his path. See how far one soul can go when guided by divine purpose. And if you're in a season of questions, don't run. Dive deeper. Your confusion could be the birthplace of someone else's freedom. And if this story opened your heart, pause here. Pray. Reflect. And if you feel this space is helping you grow in truth and courage, subscribe. You were never meant to walk this path alone. Next, we meet a man who went from tax collector to gospel writer, whose pen cut deeper than any sword, even as one ended his life in Ethiopia. What if your worst label became the reason God chose you to write history? That was Matthew's story. Once a despised tax collector, he became the author of the first gospel. Talk about plot twists. While others saw a traitor, Jesus saw a scribe of heaven. The apostles of Jesus weren't picked for perfection. They were chosen for purpose. And Matthew's purpose? To record the words that would echo through eternity. He didn't just write events. He wrote revelation. His gospel connects Jesus to prophecy, tying past to present with divine precision. You ever feel like your past disqualifies you? Matthew proves it doesn't. God can use your paper trail of mistakes to pen a masterpiece. Start small. Write your own story. Get honest. You might be surprised where the Spirit shows up. But Matthew's ending wasn't quiet. He preached across lands and was eventually killed in Ethiopia. Right in the middle of a church service, a sword struck him down, but his words never died. That's the power of truth written in spirit. It outlives us. Want to build a lasting impact? Speak and write what matters. One journal, one blog, one note at a time. That's legacy in motion. Here's a tool to try. Write one reflection a week on how faith showed up in your life. Don't filter it. Be raw. That habit could not only transform your heart, it could inspire others, just like Matthew. The apostles of Jesus didn't just live faith, they documented it. And through their ink, we received fire. And get this, his gospel still shapes theology today. Think of that. A man who once manipulated coins now shapes conscience. That's grace. That's redemption. So don't judge your value by your past role. God's call rewrites resumes. You might feel unseen now, but someone's healing might be hidden in your words. If this message found you, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe, share, and let's keep walking with these stories. They weren't just ancient, they're active, still breathing through us. Coming up next, the quiet one, often overlooked, but whose final fall from the temple became a symbol of spiritual resilience. What if the quietest voice carried the heaviest truth? James the Less didn't make headlines like Peter or John. He wasn't flashy, but when push came to shove, literally, he stood firm. Refusing to deny Christ, he was thrown from the temple and then beaten to death. No crowd, no spotlight, just quiet courage that rippled through eternity. The apostles of Jesus weren't performers. They were pillars. And James? He was stone strong in the silence. Let's pause here. Isn't that how many people feel today? Overlooked, unseen, doing the right thing with no applause. But James shows us something sacred. God sees the private sacrifices. He honors the hidden strength. So if you've been walking in quiet obedience, stay the course. Heaven is louder than the silence of earth. Here's what stands out. Even after the fall, James didn't curse. He forgave. Think about that. Bloodied, broken, still blessing. That's a level of inner peace that can't be faked. Want to get there? Practice forgiveness daily. Not just the big things, but the little grudges. That spiritual discipline will strengthen your soul for the moments when it matters most. His leadership wasn't about titles. It was about truth. As Bishop of Jerusalem, James navigated early church chaos with wisdom and grace. Today, when confusion floods your life, seek clarity in Scripture. Fast before decisions. Meditate before speaking. James the Less embodied spiritual maturity that only grows in prayer-soaked silence. The apostles of Jesus knew silence isn't absence, it's presence, amplified. His death wasn't in vain. It whispered to generations that quiet faith still speaks. His memory lives not in noise, but in the hearts of those who endure. So don't underestimate your influence just because it's not flashy. Real impact is often invisible at first, but it's deep, and it lasts. If this resonates with your journey, sit with it. Let it minister to your own silent battles. And if you feel this channel is lighting up truths you've always carried, subscribe. Walk with us. Next, we follow two men who served, side by side, until one was clubbed and the other sawn in half. Their courage in Persia was fierce, raw, and unforgettable. What would you do if your mission led you to the edge of a blade and your brother in faith fell beside you? That's what happened to Jude and Simon, two apostles, side by side, proclaiming the gospel in Persia. Their journey was filled with fire, literal and spiritual. And when the final moment came, they didn't run. Jude was beaten with a club. Simon, some say, was sawn in half. The apostles of Jesus didn't die alone. They died in purpose. Together. Here's something powerful to consider. These two weren't spotlight seekers. They were co-laborers, grounded in loyalty. How many of us have that kind of spiritual friendship? Someone who will walk with us through storms and stand with us in fire? If you don't, ask God to send one. And if you do, treasure it. Because the journey of faith was never meant to be walked alone. Their deaths weren't the end. They were a final sermon. In blood and breath, they declared, "This truth is worth everything." That's hard for modern hearts to swallow. We live in a comfort-first culture, but Jude and Simon remind us real power is sacrificial. Want to grow in this? Serve someone without expecting recognition. Give when it hurts. Pray for your enemies. That's divine strength. Here's a practice they might have lived by. Unity in adversity. When attacked, don't isolate. Press deeper. Into community. Start a prayer group. Fast as a team. Carry one another's burdens. That's what the apostles of Jesus modeled, especially Jude and Simon. Their shared death became a shared legacy. And did you know? They're buried under St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. That alone should shake you. Men once hunted, now honored. Beneath a cathedral visited by millions, from fugitives to foundations of the faith. That's redemption at scale. And it's available to you too. If something in this story echoed in your soul, don't let it fade. Subscribe, share, and join a tribe that honors truth, even when it costs. Up next, the betrayal that shattered hearts, and the sorrow that became a grave warning for every seeker of power. What if the man closest to the light became the one who plunged into the deepest night? Judas Iscariot wasn't just any follower. He walked with Jesus, shared meals, witnessed miracles. And still, he sold his teacher for 30 pieces of silver. Why? Greed? Disillusionment? We may never fully know, but one thing is clear. Proximity to truth doesn't guarantee transformation. The apostles of Jesus each had a choice. Judas chose betrayal, and his soul collapsed under the weight. Let's be honest, everyone has a price. For Judas, it was silver. For others, it's approval, pride, safety. What would tempt you to trade your convictions? That's not just a rhetorical question. It's an invitation to examine your heart. Build resistance by anchoring yourself in prayer and truth. Fast from compromise. Strengthen your spirit like a muscle. That's how you guard what matters most. But the tragedy didn't end at betrayal. Judas tried to give the money back. He realized too late the depth of his error. Overcome by guilt, he took his own life. That image is haunting and painfully human. Shame kills more slowly than swords. So here's the lesson. Remorse without repentance leads to ruin. But remorse with surrender? That's redemption's doorway. Always keep that door open. Here's a reflection exercise for your week. Write down a regret, then write next to it. What would grace say to me right now? Don't let shame fester in silence. Confess it, release it. Because even Judas, had he sought mercy, could have been restored. That's the scandal of grace. And it's available to us all, if we choose it. What stings about Judas's story is how preventable it feels. He had every opportunity, every teaching, every miracle, and yet, he allowed his inner wounds to fester into betrayal. Guard your heart, journal your wounds, heal early. The apostles of Jesus weren't without weakness. They just brought it to the right place. If this hit close to home, let it sit with you. Pray, breathe, and when you're ready, subscribe. This space is for healing, not judgment. Next, we rise from despair into legacy. A final reflection on how martyrdom forged the foundation of a faith that outlived empires. What if the blood of the persecuted became the ink of your salvation? The story doesn't end with death. It begins with what death awakened. The apostles of Jesus weren't just martyrs. They were messengers whose courage ignited a fire that empires couldn't snuff out. Rome tried to silence them. Instead, their names were etched into eternity. And their stories? They still whisper through cathedrals, scriptures, and hearts searching for purpose. Here's the thing most forget. The New Testament only scratches the surface. Early church writings, oral traditions, and ancient testimonies fill in the gaps. These weren't just isolated acts of bravery. They were part of a divine movement. So if you've ever felt like your own story is fragmented, scattered, unfinished, take heart. God can weave your scattered moments into something eternal. Think of this legacy like a flame passed down. From Peter's upside-down cross to John's exile, each apostle carried a torch. And now, it's in your hands. How will you carry it? Through prayer, through action, through love that costs something? That's the call. Start with one habit. Light a candle and reflect on the cost of truth. Let their legacy provoke something bold in you. Still wondering why it matters today? Because their blood seeded the very soil where the church now stands. Their pain gave rise to cathedrals. Their silence roared louder than emperors. And the same spirit that filled them is available now. To you. Don't just admire their lives. Embody them. Read their stories. Live their values. Pass the flame. Let me leave you with this. Legacy isn't about fame. It's about faithfulness. The apostles didn't die for recognition. They died because truth had gripped them too deeply to let go. And now, their legacy calls us higher. To forgive radically, to speak boldly, to live like eternity is real. Because it is. If this journey stirred your soul, don't walk away unchanged. Subscribe. Join the movement of those who still believe courage can change the world. Because this isn't just history. It's your invitation to suffer well, to love deeper, and to leave behind not just memories, but eternal meaning. The flame is now yours. What will you do with it? And now that you've seen the end of each apostle, tell me, was it really a tragedy? Or was it a triumph wearing the clothes of pain? These men weren't victims. They were vessels. They didn't die because they were weak. They died because their conviction burned brighter than their fear. And if their stories reached your soul today, it's because the same spirit that moved through them is knocking on your door too. So let me ask you, what are you willing to sacrifice for the truth you claim to believe? What kind of legacy are you building? Not just in words, but in choices. And if your life ended today, would it echo anything like theirs? Let this video be more than information. Let it be transformation. Rewatch it, share it, reflect on it. Then act. Start the habit. Forgive the person. Speak the truth. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be willing. If this message lit something inside you, leave a comment. Tell me, which apostle's story hit you the hardest and why? Let's build a community here, not of spectators, but of seekers. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon, because the next video might just carry the truth your soul has been waiting for. Until then, carry the flame. Live the legacy.